Hey guys, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to kind of go through some of the problems from online assignment number 5, which is just fraction review. Um, I know that Mr. Klein went over an example of each in the notes, but I wanted to look at a couple more, make sure that you understand how to set them up before you start completing them all on your own. And that's probably most important with the first 6 problems, because those are the ones that you can't just automatically start adding or subtracting, because you have to have that common denominator. Whereas when we get to the multiplying and dividing ones, it doesn't matter if they have the same denominator or not. So those can sometimes be a little bit simpler than these adding and subtracting ones. So I'm actually going to start with number 2. And actually, if you see my computer screen, it says online assignment number 5, fraction review. If you click on this, it's going to open up the worksheet. And if you've done the other assignments, you know how this works now that you work through these problems and then mark your answers on Canvas. But I'm going to start with number 2. So number 2, you have 1 over 8 plus 6 over 7. Okay, so remember, when we talk about a common denominator, we're talking about this bottom number here. The only way we can combine these is if this number is the same, and right now it's not. So we have to make it the same. To make this the same, and it's not, this isn't always going to be the case, as I'll show you with number 3. But with this one, it's probably going to be easiest. You can list out all the multiples. But if you aren't too concerned with finding the lowest common multiple, or the lowest common denominator, you can always take this fraction and multiply it by this denominator, and then take this fraction and multiply it by this denominator. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take this fraction and multiply the top and the bottom by 7. And then I'm going to take this fraction, multiply the top and the bottom by 8. Okay. So when I multiply this fraction, the top and the bottom, by 7, I'm going to get 7 over 56 plus, and then I'm going to multiply the second fraction, both the top and the bottom, by this 8. So 6 times 8 is 48. And then 7 times 8 is 56. Now that the denominator is the same, we can go ahead and add these together. Remember, when adding or subtracting, the bottom number is going to stay the same. So our final answer is going to have 56 on the bottom. And then the top, we just have to add these numbers together. So 7 plus 48 is 55. Okay. So if you look at the actual assignment, you just have to find which of those has 55 over 56 as your answer, A, B, C, or D. Okay? So now number 3, I'm not going to work through the whole thing. I forgot to get an eraser. This works, though. I'm not going to work through the whole thing, but I am going to show you that I wrote that right. I did. Sorry, trying to write and talk at the same time. You don't always have to multiply both fractions to get the lowest common denominator. So if you look here, this one's an 8 and this one's a 2. You could do the trick that we did on the last one, where you multiply this fraction by this number and this fraction by this number, and that would work, but then you would have to simplify to find your final answer, or one that matches up on here. You can also look at these and you can think to yourself, okay, there's something that I can multiply 2 by to give me 8, and that's 4. So for this one, if you just multiply the top and the bottom of the first fraction by 4, that's going to make it so that you can add these together and then find your final answer. Okay, so I'm not going to go any further on that one. I just wanted to give you that first step there. Let's jump down to 6 then. All right, so then number 6, we have 5/8 minus 1/3. Okay. So here's one. You can look at the 8 and the 3 on the bottom and try to come up with a lowest, the least common denominator, lowest common denominator. But that can be kind of tricky with 8 and 3. So I'm just going to go ahead with this one, and I'm going to say I'm going to multiply this whole first fraction by this denominator. So 3 and 3. And I'm going to do that before I deal with this one. 3 times 5 is 15. And then 3 times 8 is 24. Okay. And then if I'm going to subtract, so now that we multiplied this fraction by this denominator, we're going to multiply this fraction by this denominator. So we're going to multiply this one by 8 on the top and the bottom. Okay, so 1 times 8 is 8. 3 times 8 is 24. And now we can subtract. So again, this bottom number is going to stay the same. We're going to keep that as 24. But then you're going to do 15 minus 8 to get the top number. Just 7 over 24. Okay, so that's page 1 of that assignment. Page 2, I actually think is a lot simpler. The multiplication of fractions, I think, is probably by far the easiest of the operations. So if we look at, let's look at number 9. We've got, this is 9. I guess I haven't been numbering these, have I? 5 over 7 times 2 over 5. You simply look or multiply straight across here. So you multiply the top numbers together and you multiply the bottom numbers together. Okay, so 5 times 2 is 10. 7 times 5 is 35. Now I imagine, yeah, if you look, we run into a little bit of an issue here because we got 10 over 35. And if you look at the answer choices that are given to us, there is no 10 over 35. And that's because this can be reduced, okay, which means that you can divide both 10 and 35 by the same number. And with these, sometimes you might not know what it is right off the top of your head. And sometimes you may have to do it more than once. But for this one, I know that I can divide both of these numbers by 5 because I know 10 is divisible by 5, and I know 35 is divisible by 5. So that's where I'm going to start at. If I do, let me write it down here. If I divide this number by 5 and this number by 5, 10 divided by 5 is 2. 35 divided by 7, or by 5 is 7. I was giving you the answer there. It's 2/7. Okay? All right. Division. If you understand multiplication, you should understand division because you actually just end up multiplying. There's just one additional step that you have to do before you start multiplying. Okay. And let's look at 12. So for 12, we have 5 over 4 divided by 7 over 10. I hear my 2 oldest coming down the stairs. It may get loud here for a second. All right, so when you are dividing fractions, you are actually going to end up multiplying, but before you can multiply, we have to turn this into a multiplication problem. And to do that, we actually have to flip this second fraction, okay? So the first one stays the same. We're going to turn this into a multiplication sign, and then we are going to flip our second fraction. So instead of 7 over 10, we're going to have 10 over 7. And now you're going to do exactly what you did in the last problem. So you're going to multiply straight across. So if we do 5 times 10, we get 50. And then if you do 4 times 7, you get 28. Okay, but again, this is one that I know I can simplify, and I know I can simplify this because these are both even numbers. So that's what I'm going to divide by here. I know I can divide them both by 2 since they're even. So when I do that, I get 25, and then down here I get 7. So 25 over 7 is not 7, 25 over 14, I'm sorry. 28 divided by 2 is 14, not 7. Okay. All right, then let's do one more. So one of the word problems, and for these you need to set up a proportion. Okay. So let's do the very last one again. That's fine, close that please. So then the last one is number 15. And it says yearly homeowner property taxes are figured at a rate of, you know what, I should have been dragging this along with me. I apologize for that. Yearly homeowner property taxes are figured at a rate of $1.55 or $1.55 tax for every $100 of home value. So we're going to set up our first one as 1.55 over 100. I'm actually going to label these. I have tax on top, and then I have home value on the bottom. Okay, and it would have been okay if you had these flipped, if you had home value on top and tax on the bottom, just as long as you set up the second one exactly the same. It says find the property taxes on a townhouse valued at $131,000. So we know what the home value is for the second one. It's $131,000. But we don't know what the property taxes is or are. So we're going to put an X there. Okay. And once you have these set up, you're just going to cross multiply and divide. So we're going to multiply the two values that are known. And actually, you can cross multiply both ways if it makes it easier for you. So 100 times X is 100X. And then if I do 131,000, 131,000 times 1.55, we get 203,050. And then to solve this, we have 100 times X here, so I have to divide both sides by 100. Okay. And so we get $2,030.50. So they would have to pay in taxes for their townhouse. Okay. All right. As always, please reach out to me if you have any questions. If you have not signed up for Remind yet for our math class, please do so. It's a very good way to get a quick response to any questions that you might have. And it's an easier way for me to remind you of what assignments you still need to do. Okay. Again, please let me know if you have questions. I hope you're doing well, and I hope to hear from you soon.